Mike, you're muted.
Oh, okay, so we have a caller identified as 981. Can you let us know who you are and if you're affiliated with a party? Oh, they're not admitted yet. Yeah. Here we go. Okay, so I just wanted to recognize the person who called in. Your number ends in 981. If you could let us know who you are and if you're affiliated with a party. Just need to unmute by pressing, there you go.
Good morning, Your Honor. It's Kavita Maney, expert witness for the Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group. My Zoom doesn't work too well, which is why I'm calling in.
Okay, what seems to be the problem?
My voice comes in way too soft, and so people cannot really hear me. And I thought that might not be a good thing right now.
Yeah. Okay. What we can do is we can keep you on. We can have you connect through audio with the phone line, but then also have you join us on the video only through the internet connection. Can you try doing that?
I could, except my camera function doesn't work either. I'm so sorry, Your Honor. I need to get that fixed, but it doesn't work right now.
Okay. Kind of a surprise. All right. We do expect parties and witnesses to be on video. There should have been plenty of time to address some sort of technical difficulty if you were having that before. So there's nothing we can do. I mean, you probably won't be going first in this case. Anything that can happen on the interim. Perhaps like if you would connect your phone, your phone will be able to connect to Zoom.
I've in the past really had issues. I really do need to just get a new computer, Your Honor. So I'm so sorry that I'm creating this inconvenience today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, if we could have that fixed by the next case, you'll be involved in many more, and in the recent coming up soon as well. So please address that before we see you again.
Will do, Your Honor. I'm so sorry.
All right. So no one else seems to be joining us at this time. So before we get on the record, just wanted to, well, let's just get started. We'll just announce let's get on the record and just start the case. So this is docket 3270 WR 124. It's the reopener of Madison Gas and Electric's rate case. Its request for authority to change electric and natural gas rates. This is Michael Newmark, Administrative Law Judge for the PSC. We are on Zoom. We have parties, representatives and staff, commission staff connected. This is a party hearing session, so members of the public are welcome to attend. I don't see any at this time. We'll also be having a public session on Thursday, September 15th, and we're also taking written comments from the public. Comments we do Friday, September 16th. So just so you know where you are, where you're supposed to be, I had that notice displayed, but I can close that now. So I also shared with parties prior to the hearing the service list. Just list the entries on the service list are emails that will receive the commission order in this case and any other ALJ determinations that'll be issued in the case. Was the list used for service of documents by parties and staff. Are there any changes we need to make to the list this time?
Yes, Your Honor. This is Lucas Fikes on behalf of Renew Wisconsin.
Okay.
I had filed a notice of appearance, I believe, the week before last, and the service list has not been updated with that information yet.
Okay, I thought I had updated it for some reason. I guess that just did not occur. that's okay. Well, I can do that. Yeah, I did see that notice of appearance, although as I noted on the offered evidence list, if you could in the future file that as a request to intervene, then I'll get an email notice that it's come in. Filing anything on correspondence, just I don't get a notice about every correspondence filed in the case. So it was by chance that I found it, but I thought I'd actually put it in the list. So I apologize, I didn't do that yet. Okay, so we'll make a note of that, put that in. Okay, so speaking of that offered evidence list, let's discuss the list at this time. We can go off the record for this. Oh, and let me just make sure. Just go back to the list for a second here. Did want to make sure that we have all the parties represented. Is that correct? Are we missing anyone at this point? So we have Cub and MGE, Renew, Sierra Club, and WIG. Oh, I got your I got your party designation. Phone call. Okay, great. So we have all the parties in attendance. Okay, so let's go off the record now. And any changes to the list we need to make? I was able to update the list for the recent filings. So we do have a Pennington R, the surrebuttal, Pennington 2R, the exhibit, and I've introduced the Barnes exhibit. I think there was there staff? Filings there? No, I don't think so. Yeah, and so anything else we need to add to the list?
Your Honor, this is Brian Kleinmeyer on behalf of MGE. Can you just scroll back up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so as you do it.
Didn't you?
Supplemental for Mr. Deneau and his exhibit. So, yep, I think
that's what I was forgetting. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Your Honor, we did have one question for you on the comments that on the last page when appropriate.
On the last page. Yeah, okay, we'll get to the comments just a second, but any corrections we need to make to the filings? No? Okay, so see, there may be some adjustments needed to the testimony, I guess, depending on what happens at the hearing, but at this point, let's get on the record for this. We've reviewed the offered evidence list, and it appears that the filings listed with the corrections I've made to the list I shared with parties, accepting accepting for the record the various additional documents. All those documents are received into the record subject to verification of the part of the witnesses. And let's go off the record again. Let's discuss the comments. So yeah, let's take the applicant first with comments. Anything you have in mind in particular?
Your Honor, we'll be prepared to address the questions that you have from Mr. Weiner. The only comment that we have is for exhibit MGE Roan 3. Your comment number 2 there, files should be text searchable.
Mm-hmm.
We're willing to try to work with PSC records management on this, but we were told by our IT department, and I can just read this if it's okay with you. To the best of our knowledge, text and PDFs is searchable as long as it was created in a Word or Excel document that we then made into a PDF. text within images and PDFs is not searchable. And then they went on. Part of the issue that we have here is the Exhibit 3 contains documents that have already been filed and have PSC reference numbers associated with them in the construction dockets. And so we're certainly willing to try to work with IT at PSC to make these searchable, but we're not sure if we're going to be able to. Okay.
Yeah, I think if you have Acrobat, I think you can convert the picture to text. We've done that many times. So I mean, if it's native, if it's created, if you have a native format of Word, that should make it easier. But I think there's a tool in Acrobat that'll allow you to convert the image to text. So that shouldn't be, overly burdensome to accomplish. But yeah, I'm surprised that someone in your firm or the company didn't know that. So maybe just check back with them first and check back with your IT people and see if they can help you with that. Because I think that's pretty standard functionality of Acrobat.
Okay, we will do that.
Yeah. If you need more time, that's fine. Past the 3 days, that's fine. Just make sure. I think that shouldn't be too difficult to accomplish. But in terms of the other part of that, let's see, that was Roan, right? So in terms of filing the full version and the public version, you guys are okay with that?
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure we're on the same page.
And just to be clear, that we will have a public version full of 3R and then a confidential.
Yes. Okay, good. All right. Any other questions about those comments?
That from me.
Okay, and what about the interveners? Nothing. No. So I appreciate the company indicating they have answers for me. The Weiner question actually did add a couple more questions to his to the list, more of a general sense of just getting a sense of what we're supposed to be accomplishing with the fuel cost plan, given the fact that there seems to be a lot more volatility with costs these days. So I will have I have kind of a general, more introductory question for him, and I can ask that. It may make sense to just ask him those questions first, and then have you follow up if you'd like to follow up with the other questions, or just let me do the questioning. So that comes as a surprise, but I think it's useful in the record here because we kind of accept a lot of things in terms of the fuel cost process to run through the standard practice, but the record to me doesn't really seem to reflect what we're really trying to accomplish, and just getting more of a foundation about what the fuel plan is and how it reflects a lot more volatility than I think we're used to seeing, and what maybe we need to do about that. So just to give you a heads up about that. Any other questions on the comments? Okay. All right. So just want to make sure there's nothing I needed to discuss here. I think we're good. The other. Is this the case? Hang on, just have as you all know, there's so many cases running at the same time here. I just want to make sure I get all the comments I was going to mention. There was the one comment about I think it was the cost of service studies that were referenced in Kell's testimony. The costs A and B. That's no. Well, I guess what I'm trying to get at is just want to make sure that we have on the record MGE's cost of service studies, and again, maybe I'm getting this confused with another case, but there's, so it's cost of service studies that it had shared in data request responses. Are those presented as exhibits from MGE?
Your Honor, I believe that what we have is we have the initial filing that we made that had cost of service analysis that we believe is consistent with the commission's decision and the underlying docket. I don't believe that we filed any of the cost of service studies as exhibits that would have been responsive to the staff data requests, but it would be my understanding that those would come in through the exhibit that the staff would be putting in with the responses to data requests.
Okay. So why don't we just confirm that with staff then? Is that the case? We'll see those cost service studies come in on the data request response.
Yes, Your Honor. Yeah, the costs will be included in the staff data request. And perhaps what you're recalling is, I think in this docket, we had the initial data requests sponsored in that application exhibit from the applicants.
Yeah, what I particularly remember is that I think it was witness Kell was citing to the modifications that MGE made in response to staff's request. So an individual data request, and yeah, so it was cost A and B, but Kell here. No, it's not. I didn't write it down here. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully we'll get it all in on the data request response. I think if we could, in the future for staff, if staff could give parties advance notice what it plans to put into the data request response exhibit, then we really should be citing to those documents as if they're in the data request response exhibit. So, I mean, that exhibit can actually be updated throughout the course of the case. So if it wanted to, staff could issue that earlier so that parties know what's in it at the moment when testimony is coming in, or when they're drafting testimony. That would be useful, just so we know that it's going to be in the record. We can expect it to be in the record. And it's not required that staff put all of those data requests in its data request response exhibit in terms of rate cases. So that leads to a little bit of confusion as to what's going to be in there and what's not. And I think I give credit to MGE for the way it described those data request responses as being, they understand this will be in the exhibit, but they didn't know that for sure. So I think that's fine. I'm not going to require we go back and refile all those references as exhibit references. But it would be great if we could make that understanding known ahead of time, and then we could have those citations cited to the exhibit rather than just kind of floating as data request exhibit that we think will be in the record, but we're not really sure. So that's, and I've been seeing that in a number of cases. It's been definitely a difficult situation to manage. So, but we want to make sure, we have what we need in the record and that it's clear in the testimony where that all is.
Yes, Your Honor. And staff tried to include that in Jen Malley's direct testimony, just simply noting that the delayed exhibit will have all of staff's data requests minus IDRs and those responses. So
right, and then I think the problem could be that that direct comes in, at the same time as intervener direct and after applicant direct. So then there's that disconnect as to what parties and interveners can expect versus what staff's plan is. So some advance notice may be useful. Keep that clear. All right. Well, I think we have all we need on the Alfred evidence list. Any other questions about that? All right. Well, they're at 20 minutes. That's pretty good. We did pretty good timing here. So let's get started. I'm just going to expand this. Probably it'll look very different on your screen, I'm sure. I did want to give, because we're on YouTube, I did want to give some time for a full screen view of the people connected on video that'll be appearing in the case. It's kind of an issue we're having trying to manage this new system. So I'm going to actually stop the screen share for a moment, just to give people a sense of who's in attendance. So we do, look, as you can see, we do have the party representatives here with video cameras on. All right, well, let's get started. I think we can move on to taking our first witnesses. So why don't we start with the applicant?
Yes, Your Honor, we would call Carl Weiner. Just to clarify, with what you said before, would you like me to ask kind of the initial verification questions before you then get to the questions that you were going to ask?
Oh, yes, please. We'll get the testimony verified first. Yeah.
Okay. So we call Carl Weiner to the stand.
Okay, and I see you there. Great. So please raise your right hand, and I swear you in. And I'm going to turn your microphone on.
Actually, we are.
Oh, you're using the same. Okay, that's fine. All right. So hopefully we can hear you well. All right. So do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So you're coming in a little bit low. If there's a way to just move whatever microphone you guys are using closer to the witness.
How's that?
I'm going to just turn my volume. Maybe if so, let's off the record here. Debbie, can you hear him okay?
It's quiet, but I can make it out.
Can you increase your volume on your headset, or is it already up?
I don't. We've moved it closer, Your Honor. And
okay, that's good. Great.
Louder as well.
Okay, so I think just cut out there, but I think if everyone else remains quiet in your room, then we'll be able to pick you up. Okay. All right, so let's start over with that. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's great. Okay, go ahead.
Could you please state your name and position for the record?
Carl Weinert, Generation Planner 2, Forecasting and Optimization.
Mr. Weiner, did you prepare and submit 3 pages of direct testimony and 3 pages of rebuttal testimony in this docket?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Weiner, did you also sponsor 1 exhibit in this docket titled Exhibit MGE Weinert 1?
Yes.
Was this exhibit prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes, it was.
Is the content of your testimony in the exhibit you have sponsored still true and accurate as of the date of today's proceeding?
Yes.
Your Honor, those were the verification questions. I guess I did have one question that may be helpful to you if I ask it first before you ask yours.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Mr. Weiner, if you could, do you have the sir rebuttal testimony from PSC witness Mr. Field in front of you?
Yes, I do.
So I'm looking at page 2, starting on lines 21, 22 to page 3, lines 1 and 2. I'm just going to read that. Mr. Field testified, for consistency across units and to ensure the most recent information regarding coal availability is incorporated, commission staff maintains that both Columbia and Elm Road bid adders should be updated in the final production fuel cost model run based on the most recent data available at the time of the model run. Do you agree with the testimony that Mr. Field provided?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Is that all the questions you have for now?
At this point, I mean, we had a few more based on the comments that you had, but that was it.
Okay. Yeah, let me just get started then with what I was interested in, just getting on the record. Witness Weiner, I appreciate this. So what I'm curious about is just making sure we have on the record just a general understanding of I think we have an understanding of the fuel cost plan process. It's in PSC 116. But in terms of what it's trying to accomplish, obviously we're looking at predicting the costs for fuel, putting them into rates, and then the rule allows for a true up at the end of the fuel cost plan year. But what I was curious about getting MGE's position on is what it sees as the volatility in this past, I would say past few years. I think in the 2020 fuel cost plan, we saw some of this, and we're seeing it now. And I'm assuming we're seeing it in the fuel cost plan for 2023. And so what it thinks the volatility, areas of volatility are, and what it's trying to do about them in terms of how it's reflected in the fuel cost plan, if it is, and how it is reflected in the fuel cost plan. So let me just begin by asking, generally in the past few years, it appears that fuel availability and commodity costs and transportation reliability and costs are much more volatile than in past experience. Do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So does MGE's proposed fuel cost plan account for items of cost and availability that appear to be unpredictable because of this volatility?
I believe so.
Okay, so how does it do that?
If you're looking at natural gas costs and energy prices, those of course have been very volatile. It's kind of a supply and demand issue, really. We are required by PSC staff to tie those in our fuel cost plan to NYMEX futures prices, which we do. So we're capturing what the market believes the prices are going to be. Another area that I know that we'll be talking about is coal bid adders due to the issues in delivering coal and so forth. Again, we're in our fuel cost plan attempts to conserve coal for when it is needed at high demand periods and so forth. So we use bid adders to dispatch the units accordingly to ensure that we have enough coal inventory at the right times. So we factor in things like that. And we try to recognize new regulations and so forth. The cross-state air pollution rule. There's a little section in my testimony about that. So we try to capture things that are unknown at this point, a little unpredictable, but we at least raise the issue on those kinds of things. Does that cover some of those things that you were thinking of?
Yeah, generally, I guess what I'm curious about knowing is to the extent things are not predictable, like we could try to use the NYMEX pricing. It's a snapshot in time on a certain date, but when we're looking at increased volatility, does the increased volatility from the past practice, so our current practice is to use NYMEX futures on a specific date to predict what, for example, gas prices will be. But when we're expecting more volatility, is that reflected in the plan, the increased volatility beyond what we've been able to predict?
We're aware and we're always watching what's happening and have internal discussions. At this point, we're still using the futures markets, believing that that's the best indicator of what the prices will be for the test year.
Okay, and so related to that, so we're sticking with our current practice, which is what we expect to do. But if there are unexpected changes in fuel costs during the plan year, what's MGE's position on seeking a mid-year adjustment under the fuel rules?
Yes, that's come to our attention recently, and we've had discussions and we're monitoring to see if that makes sense to move forward with that. We've been meeting roughly every 2 weeks to evaluate that. At this point, I believe, I know I missed the last meeting, but I believe that we're still not at the point where we think it's worth the effort to come in for a mid-year adjustment for 2022, for example.
Okay, and what would kind of trigger you to come in for a mid-year adjustment? What are the criteria would you be looking at?
I don't know if there's specific criteria, but obviously if actual fuel costs are very significantly from what was approved in our fuel cost plan, I think it really comes down to that and looking at those volatile factors and so forth and trying to predict where we might end up at the end of the year. And if it looks like it would make sense to come in for a mid-year adjustment.
So no specific things like a coal rail strike or things like that that might occur during the year. Is that?
Yeah, we look at all of that. We're aware of what's happening there, but those are all factors that we discuss on an ongoing basis.
Okay. Just part of the factors that you're looking at.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thanks. I appreciate just reviewing that for us, just so the record's clear. Like I said, as we kind of overlook kind of the basics on these cases because we're so used to doing them. The other question, more of a specific pinpoint question here, was in your direct, page 3, it's lines 14 and 16, and I can bring that up here. Just a minute. More than a minute. Okay. So it's a statement that you made on like I said, page 3, lines 14 through 16 regarding updates that will be made prior to the commission's decision, which we're expecting to see those updates. What I've noticed in past testimony, and I've noticed in other fuel plan cases for the other utilities this year, wind isn't something that I've seen listed as the update as one of the update categories. And I'm just curious, what do you mean by updating for wind? And is that something new that MGE is proposing that it hasn't done in the past?
This is not anything new. It is consistent with past updates that we've done at this stage.
Okay, and it's just wind generation, or is it transmission congestion? What are you updating it to?
It's both. We look at wind curtailment, and if when we update for wind curtailment, we make sure that we're not double counting it in hourly generation that we feed into our production, our fuel cost model. So it goes hand in hand with our pricing update, just making sure that we're consistent with pricing and so forth. And because the curtailment and the wind generation go hand in hand, we just adjust those to make sure that if we update curtailment, that we're not double counting it, for example, in our hourly wind generation.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, that's all I have on my list here. So I'm done with my questions. Anything else from MGE?
Your Honor, just one question related to the line of questioning you had on mid-year adjustments. Mr. Weiner, just if you're aware, has MGE met with commission staff this year to discuss, whether or not a mid-year adjustment for the 2022 fuel cost plan would be appropriate?
I believe that we have had meetings with them to keep them abreast of what we've been talking about internally as to whether we think it's time for us to do so. I personally wasn't involved in direct meetings with them, but I believe that others have.
If you know, is the feedback provided by commission staff on a potential mid-year adjustment something that MGE takes into consideration as part of its analysis?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, great. Okay, so let's open this up to cross. Do we have questions for this witness? Since we have a bunch of parties here, let's just go down our list. So we'll start with Cub.
No questions, Your Honor.
No questions. How about Renew?
No cross for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, Sierra Club.
No questions, thank you.
And Wig.
Yes, Your Honor, I do have a couple of questions.
All right, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Weiner, Steve Heinzen, representing the Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group. How are you this morning?
Thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you. I have some questions that I was going to, Judge Newmark asked some questions that I'm interested in as well. So we're off. He stepped on off to a good start here. I would like to have, if I can, a better understanding of, in particular, the bid adders, and just as an objective matter, what was in your fuel forecast when you first filed the case, how that may or may not have changed when there was a fuel update. by the commission staff and where we are today. And I guess the best place to start then would just to ask, do you recall the date that your field forecast was prepared?
Yeah, I believe we were preparing it in mid-January.
Okay, so when you filed in April, I think it was April 1 or April 2, that included a field forecast that you ran in mid-January.
Right. We were using pricing as of mid-January, as we usually do for an initial filing.
Okay. Did you use a bid adder for Columbia and Elm Road in that initial fuel forecast?
Yes, we did.
Do you recall what that bid adder did to the forecast or the bids for the two? What was the value when you put that in?
I don't recall the exact dollar amounts, but it would increase the costs. Our coal units are typically our lower cost units to serve our load. So by putting in the bid adders, it's intentional due to coal delivery issues. We want to make sure that we have enough coal to serve load during peak times and also maintain a balance in inventory throughout the year, including at the end of the year, certain targets that we would have. So without our coal units available, other more expensive units, our gas units, for example, energy market purchases that would be higher priced based on the pricing that we talked about would run instead. So it kind of comes down to trying to balance the coal inventory to use it or have it available during peak times. So to answer your question, yeah, it did increase our fuel cost by putting in bid adders, but I can't recall specifically the dollar impact of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. And that's really what I'm interested in is just to observe how the bid adders have changed since you filed the case, at the outset. Are you familiar and do you have in front of you possibly Mr. Fields, Ms. Fields' direct testimony?
I do.
If you could turn to page 7. And you can just tell me when you're there.
Yep, I am there.
Okay. So starts at line 22, and I'll ask Mr. Field this as well, but I just want to have an understanding of I guess some of the terms here. But writes 22, the adjusted production fuel cost model results filed by the applicant included. And then that moves on to this filed bid adders. And what I want to know is, do you know what he means by adjusted production fuel cost model?
Yeah, we use a production fuel cost model as part of preparing our annual fuel cost plan. So we would be inputting coal bid adder.
Sure. I'm sorry. I just want to interrupt real quickly. I'm just wondering about the word adjusted. That which suggests to me that this is at least a second fuel cost model run that you have prepared.
Yeah, this was MGE's updated estimate of what the bid adders would be at the point in time that the audit was being performed. The initial filing again was based on information from mid-January. So now that we're in the middle of the year, audits being performed, we have some more history based on coal deliveries and so forth. So we had a new estimate at that point in time.
Okay, and if and you can read to the next page, I guess down to line 3 on field 8. Am I reading this correctly that when you did the adjusted production fuel cost model, the result of the bid adders was to raise the fuel costs by $34.8 million?
Yep, that is correct. Right. Yeah, we the information that we were looking at as far as coal or rail deliveries was not performing very well. So based on that, we had to increase our coal bid adders again to maintain the appropriate inventory levels. So that's what drove that increase.
Okay, so the I guess the remainder of the answer to this question, I think the beginning of the next, which begins on line 19. Do you know whether commission staff included any adjustment to the original bid adders that you had in place from your production fuel cost run in the filed case?
My understanding is that they did not, but MGE proposed an update based on new information that we had.
Okay, and that was the 4.8 million.
Correct.
Okay. If you would look to field 9. Actually, maybe beginning on line 23 of field 8, and then continuing. It says a supplemental model run.
Oh, I'm sorry, which line number?
I'm sorry, if you begin, why don't you just let's begin at field 8, beginning with the question at line 19. And then read that question and then read the answer through the end of the first paragraph.
Want me to read that out loud?
No, you don't need to. No. And just let me know when you're finished.
All right, I have read that.
Okay, thank you. So he notes here that a supplemental model run provided by the applicant. Do you know what he is referring to with, I guess, the word supplemental? What MGE did in connection with this?
Yeah, it actually was a data request from PSC staff. They had met with Wisconsin Power and Light, the operator of the Columbia coal units, and discussed their assumptions as far as coal deliveries, and came to an agreement as to a certain level of trains per day in delivery, which was higher than what MGE had. So they asked us to perform a run of our model using that assumption, which we did, and that reduced that increase down to 16.3 million using that assumption.
Okay, and this involves just Columbia and not Elm Road?
Columbia was really the one that was at issue. Elm Road, we actually received the bid adders from WEC. We don't dispatch that unit ourselves. We just take our ownership share. So we do ask and receive from them what bid adder assumptions we should make. So that's usually, that's pretty much a given what we'll run there. So this data request, I believe, is only relating to the Columbia generating units.
Okay. And now just the relationship between those two numbers, as I understand from your testimony now, that when you did the updated fuel run or the adjusted production fuel run, the result for the bid adders was $34.8 million. That was, as you understand it, not included in the fuel forecast for the reasons that are cited in Mr. Field's testimony. And then the 16.3 million was a new forecast of the net cost of the Columbia related bid adders.
Right. It's running the model again using those new assumptions as far as coal deliveries, bid adders.
Okay. And do you know whether that 16.3 was included in the commission staff's fuel forecast?
I don't believe so. I believe they asked us to run. I know that they were kind of caught off guard a little bit by the amount and so forth. Things were changing pretty quickly with these deliveries and what we're seeing and so forth. And even a little change in the amount of deliveries of coal makes a big difference in the cost. So at the point in time that we had proposed this, they hadn't had much time to really think about it, and they hadn't proposed anything themselves that I'm aware of. So it was our initial adjustment or our initial modeling, and then the adjustment based on that revised assumption after PSC staff had consulted Wisconsin Power and Light Company. So yeah, I'm not aware of staff doing any of their own adjustments. That I believe that's why they asked for this second run here using the assumptions that they worked out with Wisconsin Power and Light.
Okay, thank you. And is that the information I'm looking at your testimony now come from the conversation that you've had with Power and Light on July 28th, 2022?
Yeah, that was a conversation that PSC staff had with
Okay.
Wisconsin Power and Light, and they came up with that revised assumption with coal deliveries, and then PSC staff put forth a data request asking us to do a run using that assumption.
Okay, great. Thanks. I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other cross?
No cross.
I just had a quick follow-up for you, Witness Weiner. To end my confusion about the difference between Columbia and Elm Road. If as the operator, Wisconsin Power and Light's going to be dispatching that unit, and is it similar with Elm Road that MGE is sort of is a passive player in that situation, or does it have some control over the dispatch of Columbia?
It's very different. For the Columbia plant, there are 3 joint owners. Wisconsin Power and Light is the operator of the plant. However, each of the co-owners dispatches their own share of the plant and manages their own coal inventory and executes their own business strategies around that. Versus Elm Road, where MGE is just like you said, it's just a passive owner. We don't dispatch our share. We just simply get our share of the generation that's been dispatched by WEC.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good enough for me. I'll leave that to the rest of the experts, but thanks. Okay. Anything else for this witness? Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Great. All right. Thanks. Well, at that point, then you're excused. Thanks very much.
Your Honor, the applicant would call Brian Pennington.
All right. Let's see him here. I knew he was here before. Maybe he's on another page. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, great. So please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Oh, we're having trouble hearing you. Sorry.
Can you hear me better now?
Perfect. Great. Okay, excellent. So yes, you did answer affirmatively. So let's go ahead.
Could you please state your name and position for the record?
Brian Pennington. I'm the director of rates at Madison Electric.
Mr. Pennington, did you prepare and submit 8 pages of rebuttal testimony in this docket?
Yes, I did.
Was the initial filing of your rebuttal testimony replaced by replacement rebuttal testimony?
Correct.
I would just like, do you have a copy of your replacement rebuttal testimony before you?
I do.
Just for the record and for all of the parties, just want to try to identify what the changes are because they are minimal. If you could turn to page 6 of your replacement testimony.
Okay, I'm there.
Now, I'm focusing on lines 14 through 20, which were also identified by the administrative law judge in the offered evidence list. Is the changes to your testimony contained within those lines 14 through 20 on page 6?
Correct, yes.
Can you identify what the changes are?
We updated the numbers in response to comments from Judge Newmark. We had the residential energy use was changed to 7,346 MGE customers. Previously, it was 5,214. And then on line 16, we had changed the low-income customer use number from 551 kilowatt hours to 560 kilowatt hours. We also had a change to shift from referencing the previous PSC data request from the prior UR 124 proceeding to now reference the testimony and exhibit from Mr. Riley Deneau.
Okay. Mr. Pennington, did you also sponsor 3 exhibits in this docket? Exhibit MGE Pennington 1, Exhibit MGE Pennington 2R, so a replacement exhibit for the second exhibit, and then also Exhibit MGE Pennington 3?
Yes, I did.
And can you have your Exhibit 2 in front of you, the replacements exhibit?
Yes, I do. Just give me a moment, please.
Could you, within your replacement exhibit, could you identify where the changes occurred and what those were from the initial exhibit 2?
Sure, yes. In the footnote, I made similar changes to what were described for the testimony to update the sample size and the change in per kilowatt hour usage.
So is that the third bullet point in the footnote that starts low income residential customers?
Correct. So that now reflects the 560 kilowatt hours and the larger sample size of 7,346 customers. And then as a result of that change, the average low income residential calculations where in the third column of numbers under the rate comparison changed slightly based on that change in usage.
And when you say rate comparison, are you referring to the box in the top left corner titled rate comparison?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Were the 3 exhibits prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes.
Is the content of your testimony in the exhibits that you have sponsored still true and accurate as of the date of today's proceeding?
Yes, they are.
Okay, just a couple more questions. As part of your rebuttal testimony, did you adopt as your own testimony the 16 pages of direct testimony previously filed by Mr. John D. Kruger on behalf of MGE in this docket?
I did adopt that, yes.
And did you also adopt as part of your rebuttal testimony the 3 exhibits that were filed by Mr. Kruger in this docket?
Yes.
And as far as you are aware, were those exhibits prepared by Mr. Krieger or under his direction?
Yes, they were.
And is it the case that you are also verifying the pre-filed testimony and exhibits by Mr. Krieger?
Yes, I am.
As far as you are aware, is the information contained in Mr. Krieger's pre-filed testimony and exhibits still true and accurate as of the date of today's proceeding?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. Your Honor, we don't no further questions for this witness.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just go off the record for a minute. I just wanted to talk another in the woods procedural matter. I do appreciate going through the changes to testimony that were made. What we usually expect is that discussion, if there needs to be discussion like that, it be done in the email that you provide parties when you're serving it. Then we don't have to go through those changes. Just if someone has a question or an objection to those changes, they already have notice of it by virtue of that service email that you use to serve the replacement exhibit or the replacement testimony. And then actually filing the replacement testimony was my fault because I guess what we really should have done is just file it in errata, and that would have given people notice of what the changes would have been. But I did instruct you to file revised rebuttals. That's my fault. So having the errata, having the errata really does just show the changes. So that really solves the problem as to informing the parties what the changes are. And then, in terms of replacement exhibits, that's something you probably want to give people a heads up in that email to say, hey, we're refiling this exhibit. We changed, a number or something that's embedded in there has changed, just to give people an idea of what the change is, if it's not obvious to them. But so thank you for doing that. But I guess the real issue is that should have been an errata, not a revised testimony. But that's really my fault. I told you to put it in as revised. So I'll take the hit for that one. Okay, so no more questions. Is this witness available for cross then?
Yes, he is, Your Honor.
Okay, so let's get back on the record. Any questions? Anyone? We go down the list first. So Cub, Renew, Sierra Club.
I do, Your Honor.
Okay, good. So now you're going to reference some of the final order in the underlying settlement case, as well as the settlement document. Is that my understanding?
That's correct. Generally, I don't think so with this witness.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, so let's go ahead then. Go ahead with your questions. Thanks.
Good morning, Mr. Pennington. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. How about myself?
I can hear you. Thank you. I have some questions for you about Mr. Krieger's Exhibit 2, which I understand you to be adopting. Do you have that in front of you?
I can get there. Give me just a moment, please.
Yeah, off the record, I can put that on the screen as well. Yeah, while we're off the record, okay, I am seeing the speaker on YouTube. So the way YouTube works, just so you know, the person who's speaking, if I have the screen share on, which I think we probably need as we're referencing these documents, but if I have the screen share on, then YouTube just shows who's speaking as part of the YouTube stream. And if if the question's really quick, then the person who's answering may not appear on the screen. But otherwise, I just noticed that I hadn't seen the speaker for a while, but it's coming back. So I don't know what the system's up to, but that generally speaking, the speaker is going to be appearing on the live stream. So, okay, so I have Kruger 2. Are you all set there, Witness Pennington?
Yes, I think I'm aligned with where you're at.
Okay, great. So let's get on the record.
Okay, Mr. Pennington, to understand Krieger Exhibit 2, there are 3 different customer cost methodology calculations in essentially 3 columns. Do you see that?
Yes, I do see it.
Okay, so I want to ask questions about the very left column, which is titled Attachment D, Basic Customer Cost Methodology.
Okay, I
And
see.
is it your understanding that in this column, under Attachment D, Basic Customer Cost, so Krieger added up a number of costs based on FERC accounts identified in Attachment D to the settlement in the initial phase, last year's phase of this proceeding?
Yeah, my understanding it is that Attachment D was agreed as being cost information that would be communicated as a part of that settlement agreement. And I was also instructed from the commission to provide that information as a part of this proceeding. And so Mr. Krieger had updated that information accordingly and provided into the record.
Okay, thank you. And if I look at that Attachment D, I match up most of these columns or most of these rows, except that Mr. Krieger's Exhibit 2 includes account 904 uncollectible towards the bottom. Do you see that?
Yeah, the 904. Yes, I do.
Yeah, and that's 56 cents, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So as I look at Attachment D to the settlement agreement, I don't see that as one of the included FERC accounts. Are you aware whether or not it is?
Your Honor, could I jump in for a second? Mr. Bender is correct. We noticed this error too as we were preparing for today's hearing. And we are certainly willing to refile if necessary, if that's what Mr. Bender would like, or you would like, refile Mr. Krieger's Exhibit 2 with that column with the 904 account in the column on the far left removed, and then that number changed accordingly. As we were preparing for the hearing, we also noticed, I think, that Mr. Kell addressed this in his direct testimony. And so to be consistent with that and in the line of questioning that Mr. Bender has, we can do that if you'd like.
Well, I certainly is a good idea to update things. I wanted to let's hear from Attorney Bender on that. And I guess we'll continue the line of questioning if he does deem that necessary. So go ahead, Attorney Bender, do you have a?
Yeah, the point of the question was just to understand if that was a intentional or if that was an error. And I understand from counsel that it was an error. And so, we're fine with updating it, or we could just through question and answer here, just understand how the total will change. So it's on the record.
Well, look, why don't let's do both actually. Because I think if we're all agreeing there's an error, then we can just put in the revised exhibit. So that would just be, we'll just keep it Kruger 2, but make it 2R. And is there an easy way of, you're looking to getting the totals on the bottom recalculated? Is that what you're intending?
That's correct. So my next question would be, if we exclude 904 uncollectible, 56 cent, we'd take 56 cents off of the 13.43, and if my math is right, that should produce $12.87. Subject to check.
Yeah, okay. Well, and I think that that's probably going to work, and we can just verify that with the revised filing. So that's
Your Honor, I agree with Mr. Bender that that would be the number.
okay. That's fine. Okay, so we will want a revised filing on that, just so the record's clear. If someone just picks up the exhibit, and starts looking at it without the benefit of the record. So let's do that. Any other questions?
I do have a couple more questions.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Pennington, on Krieger Exhibit 2, there's also towards the bottom of the first column some rows that do not have FERC account numbers that are under a subheading taxes. Do you see that?
Correct.
Okay. As I understand the attachment D to the settlement from last year, the agreement was to provide costs based on FERC accounts and then any directly related tax expense. Is that your understanding as well?
That'd be my best understanding of it, yes.
Okay. Do you know how the company determined what amount of taxes are directly related to FERC account expenses further up the rows above?
I would have to go into the detail, the spreadsheets to really hone in on exactly what's happening in that calculation. My best understanding is it would come from cost allocation where, your tax allocators are typically composite allocators. So they're likely going to be dependent upon how other costs are allocated, and then would get pulled towards those particular functions, then would be broken out to tie back into those particular numbers there. Is that helpful?
Maybe. Let me ask a follow-up. So does that mean that the percentage of taxes allocated to customer costs should be proportionate to the costs in the rows above in this column, attachment D, customer cost methodology?
I think so. That's my best understanding right now. I think so.
Okay, so that my confusion is because if I look across to the far right column of this exhibit, which is Krieger 2, there's a different methodology and comes to a different total of costs of $15.36 roughly. But the allocated taxes appear to me to be the same between the first and the third column, at least on the taxes other than income row. You see that?
I see that.
Okay. Is that an error, or is that to be expected given that the total costs in the rows above are different between the two columns?
Yeah, I couldn't explain that right now. I would have to look at the calculations in more depth to understand that.
Okay. I guess related to our prior set of questions on recalculating the first column to $12.87, will the amount of taxes allocated to directly attributable, will that change as well?
So as far as if I understand your question, that you're suggesting that if the tax amounts are for estimate's sake, let's say like is it fair to say they're $1.80, that when we remove the 56 cents associated with uncollectible, that you're estimating whether you're asking whether that $1.80 would ratably be reduced?
Correct, that's the question.
Without going into the analysis, I can't confirm for certain without digging in, but it's possible. I'd have to take a look at it.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions about this exhibit in terms of mathematical calculations?
Not about mathematical calculations. I have one other question about this exhibit for the witness, if he's able to answer.
Okay.
So I'm looking, Mr. Pennington, at Krieger Exhibit 2, that left-hand column under account 903, customer records and collection. Do you see that?
And it's approximately 7.4 million.
Right, or $4.37 per customer per month. Do you see that?
Correct. Yep.
So as I'm looking at all of the costs here identified in this column, that's the largest one. And it's larger than, at $4.37, it's larger than all the meter reading and related expenses combined. Do you agree with that?
Correct.
Okay. What is included in this account 903?
I could go back to the FERC definition for the accounts, but my best understanding is that's kind of where our billing system and records keeping would be, those costs are located.
Okay, so that would be all costs related to customer billing and customer records?
I'd have to dive deeper to affirm that it's there in totality. You know, when you say all, my best recollection is that's the cost that's in that account.
And what's included in customer records other than billing?
I don't have a different answer than what I already gave you.
Okay. Then I have a few questions for you about your exhibit 2 as well. Do you have that in front of you?
Well, let's just take a moment here. Just to follow up on the last question, in terms of collection expenses, is that related to arrears, or is it direct expenses for the company to collect?
I think it's if my best recollection is it's the entire billing function. So like to the degree we have personnel and systems to ensure that we're billing and collecting revenue appropriately, it's that entire function is within that FERC account.
With disconnections too?
Per the follow-up to try to follow up on that, correct. Although I would say some of the engineering personnel may fall into some of the other FERC accounts.
Okay. So, there's a number of questions here that your answer was really need to go look back. And I understand that. And these are, pretty detailed looks into the spreadsheet, which is fine, I think is useful. I think we possibly need to have a slightly different process. If in your filing of Kruger 2R, I think the questions are pretty clear on the record as to what Attorney Bender was looking for. But if you could answer those questions as well after review of the underlying spreadsheets and the FERC accounts, that would be, I think, useful in that sense. And then as an exhibit filed after the hearing, there'd still be an opportunity for a party or staff to not necessarily object to the filing, but to at least raise questions about the filing. Perhaps there may be something missing that isn't clear. The alternative is if MGE would want to share that exhibit first to the service list and just make sure questions are answered and that there's clarity as to what seems to be unanswered at this point. So I can put both of those processes out for people to consider, but maybe more useful if the company just served all the parties and staff the revised Kruger 2 with answer to those questions, and then just to make sure there's nothing missing or something that's unclear to parties, and then file once they get some confirmation, file the final version. So what we could do is give the 3 working days to get the sort of the draft R2 out to parties and staff, and then I could provide some time for response, and just for informally for people to make sure that they've confirmed that their questions have been answered, that the answers are clear. So if we did 3 days to submit the proposed revision, and then serve to parties and staff the proposed revision, and then say 2 days to make sure that it's clear to the parties and staff. So 2 days for a response to the filer, a response to MGE, just to make sure that it's clear. And then if there's a dispute on this, we can go further, but I don't think there's going to be much to do about that. But this way we'll just have those questions answered now that they've been raised. So does that make sense to everybody? 3 days to file a proposed, 2 days to not file, I'm sorry, 3 days to share the proposed 2R, and then 2 days to respond to MGE about any clarifications that are needed.
Yeah, we can do that. So that my understanding that would be we would serve by Friday of this week. I guess the only request that I would have of Mr. Bender is if he could maybe email to me his questions, because we're not gonna have the transcript out by that point, and my fingers don't move that fast.
Sure, that'll work.
I will try to do so to the extent I can recall.
We can leave it to after the draft transcript and start there. So draft transcript is due on Thursday. So after the draft transcript, you'll get 3 days to revise, and then 2 days to respond.
Thank you.
Thanks for mentioning that. All right. So any other questions from Sierra Club?
I do have some questions about Pennington Exhibit 2.
Okay. Oh, yes. Right. And so we're talking about 2R now?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Pennington, can you see the exhibit Pennington 2R in front of you?
I do. Give me just a moment. I'd like to pull it up in my own records as well, please.
Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I do see that.
Yep. So if I'm looking at this, there's 2 columns. I'm looking at the left column under rate comparison first. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, as I understand this, you've calculated the volumetric and customer charge under 3 scenarios. One is under current rates. One is if the customer charge is reduced from $17 to $15, what the resulting volumetric charge would be. And then the third is if the customer charge stays the same, $17, what the volumetric charge would be based on the other changes going on in this reopening proceeding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then in the right-hand column under technology and efficiency overview, it's my understanding from your testimony on this exhibit that you've calculated kind of the cost of some technology, running certain technologies, lights, air conditioning, refrigeration, solar, and then electric vehicles under each of those scenarios from the left-hand column. Is that correct?
It does present. What I did present is more so a scenario of how the average residential customer is impacted on the right side. I don't bring in the those are just showing those technologies on the right side. So it's, to be clear, I think it's not bringing in the low income aspect of that as well.
Okay. But you do bring in the customer charge and then the volumetric rates from the rate comparison text box in the exhibit. Is that correct?
The volumetric charge is correct.
Okay. And then in the very right-hand column, under the technology and efficiency overview text box, you show the difference between column B and column C. That would be the difference between a rate design with a $15 customer charge and the volumetric charge of 15.3 cents compared to a rate design with a fixed charge of $17 and the volumetric charge of 14.95 cents.
That's generally correct, yes. I think the numbers are behind my head if you're looking at the screen. So I think the differences you're pointing out, correct.
Okay. And why did you use the difference between a $15 and a $17 fixed charge rather than the difference between a $17 fixed charge and I think we said it's $12.87 once revised from Krieger Exhibit 2 under the Attachment D basic customer cost?
That was illustrating the difference between present and proposed rates that were on the record tying to rebuttal. And as of the time of this exhibit, there was agreement on what that rate design would be. So it's illustrative of the rate change that we have in this proceeding and in the context of the agreed upon impacts of that fixed charge change.
Okay. Are the impacts of the fixed charge change proportionate in your technology and efficiency overview calculations?
No, I didn't do that. I didn't do a calculation to illustrate it.
Okay, but with the, okay, so let me ask it this way. If I'm looking at the solar netting row on your exhibit 2, do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And so there's a $38 annual savings for a solar netting customer, the size of the customer assumed here, if the fixed charge is decreased from $17 to $15. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so for that, that's a $2 change in the fixed charge. Is there a proportionate reduction if the fixed charge were reduced by $4? In other words, would we double this $38?
I'd have to do the math to check and see what the impact would be.
Yeah, but that's the way the math works, right? The increased volumetric charge is volumetric charge is increased to recoup the revenue difference if we reduce the customer charge.
I'd have to do, again, I'd have to do the math to really see what the impact is.
Okay, so is your testimony then today, sitting here, if the customer charge were reduced from $17 to $13, you do not know what the savings would be under each of the technologies identified in your exhibit 2?
I think I've illustrated the savings under the technology. So if there was a shift from $17 to $15, I think that was the question that was asked. So
my question was if it's reduced from 17 to 13, can you testify today about what the difference in savings would be?
No, I can't.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have for this witness.
All right. Other cross? Okay, looks like Wig, you have some questions?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Pennington.
Morning.
Steve Heinzen for Wig. I have some questions for you regarding Ms. Maney's testimony. Have you had a chance to review her rebuttal and Sir rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have reviewed it.
Okay, so she noted that at a 4.38% increase under MGE's originally proposed allocation, the CP1 class would have seen a 0.2% increase in its 2023 rates. The commission's audit, which reduced fuel costs by more than $10 million, reduced the system increase to 0.51%. Does that sound right so far?
Yes, I follow you.
Okay. So Ms. Maney argues that the CP1 rate class should not receive an increase more than 0.2% for an increase that includes an increase, for an increase that includes the $3.3 million reconciliation amount and updated fuel costs from final production fuel cost run that is less than MGE's originally filed 4.38% increase. Did you follow that?
I did follow what you described so far, yes.
Do you agree with Ms. Maney?
I think that's I think it makes sense. Yeah, I agree with her. I think I can see where, a lot of, in the context of the incremental costs that are being discussed and the incremental changes, ultimately the cost of service still supports that range of a very tempered impact for the CP1 class of that 0 to 0.2%.
Okay, thank you very much. Have just one more question for you then, and that is on Exhibit MGE Pennington 1.
Okay, I'm there.
Okay. I just have to get there now. Okay, yes. So, Judge Newmark has this on the screen right now. The calculation that you're providing here, the only question I have for you is this. The undercollected amount, including interest of $3,324,506. If that were to be allocated if that were to be allocated strictly on energy, one would divide the $3,324,506 by the total usage in the top column, which was, $3,062,877.29 kWh. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Other interveners? Oh, there are no other interveners. How about commission staff questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, so we're done with witness Pennington. Thanks very much. You're excused.
Your Honor, we have 3 additional witnesses. My understanding is there's no cross-examination. I guess I want to, for any of the witnesses, if that's the case, we would do verification. Although I know Mr. Deneau filed some testimony yesterday, probably at about the same time or after when the emails were sent out. So there may be the case that there's some cross for him.
Okay. Yeah, let me just check my list out. I'm done with my list of questions. So we have, it would be Deneau, Roan, and Trin.
Correct.
The remaining witnesses. Yeah. Do parties or staff have any cross?
Your Honor, I will have some cross for Mr. Deneau, but not the other 2 witnesses.
Okay. So we can accept the Roan and Trin testimony by affidavit if the applicant wishes to do that.
Thank you, Your Honor. And then if that works, then we would call on Mr. Deneau to the stand.
All right. There you are. All right, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
Could you please state your name and position for the record?
Riley Deneau, Custom Energy Product Manager. Sorry.
Mr. Deneau, did you prepare and submit 5 pages of supplemental rebuttal testimony in this docket?
Yes, I did.
Did you also sponsor 2 exhibits in this docket, Exhibit MGE Deneau 1 and Exhibit MGE Deneau 2?
Yes.
Were these exhibits prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes.
Is the content of your testimony and the exhibits that you have sponsored still true and accurate as of the date of today's proceeding?
Yes.
No additional questions, Your Honor. Mr. Deneau is available for cross.
All right, so we have questions for Sierra Club. Anyone else ahead of Sierra Club on the list has questions? No. All right, so let's go ahead, Attorney Bender.
Good morning, Mr. Deneau. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, I can.
Okay, thanks. So I have some questions for you about the calculations that you did that are reflected in your Exhibit 2. No, sorry, in your Exhibit 1.
Okay.
Okay. So as I understand the analysis that you did and then you discuss in your testimony, you identified customer usage, and there's a couple of steps of that to talk about, and then identified for each customer for which you had information available, the customer's income, and then tried to determine which customers were in one of 3 buckets based on essentially 1.5 in below federal poverty, 1.5 times federal poverty rate, and then 2 times federal poverty rate. Is that a fair summary of your analysis?
Yes.
Let's talk about the first step then. So I understand from your testimony on page 3, you tried to determine customer usage during 2021 calendar year. Is that correct?
Just can you clarify where you're looking at right now?
Sure. Lines 16 to 18 on page 3.
It's not calendar, it's billed.
Okay, so all bills that went out during calendar year 2021. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so there may be some slight difference in January and December based on when bills went out, but it's essentially all bills during 2021.
Essentially, yes.
Okay. How did you deal with customers who had fewer than 12 bills during 2021? So new customers or customers who left during the year?
Yeah, so I took the total billed usage that we had divided by the total number of billed days, and then multiplied that by 365 and divided by 12 to get an annualized monthly usage.
Okay, did you apply any weighting based on whether it was, summer versus winter versus shoulder months that you had data for?
No.
So if a customer had left after the summer usage period, you would have annualized based on that, even there's did not account for the fact that the remaining months may have been lower use than the few months you had for that customer, correct?
Yeah, I didn't do any I didn't imply any assumptions as to their seasonal usage. So I did not apply any weights based on the months that they were billed.
How many customers had fewer than 12 billed months during 2021 in your analysis?
I don't know what that number is off the top of my head.
As I understand, then part of this calculation of customer usage, you also aggregated meters that you attribute to the same customer. Is that correct?
Yes, attributed to the same person or customer. Yes.
Okay, and how did you determine that multiple meters are attributed to the same customer?
We have a person identifying field in our billing system that lets us know, if, whether meters are under or belonging to the same individual. And so I can aggregate that way. So every account, every meter has a person identifying field tied to them.
And by person, do you mean first and last name?
It can be. So I mean, also within that field will be company names for commercial, but for this, it's going to be first and, well, the ID is a numeric, but yes, a first and last name.
Okay. And so how do you know if, if there's two, Jack Johnson in your service territory, that they're the same person versus two people with the same name?
In the data set, what I was saying, the person ID field is numeric. So if they are different, or if they are determined to be different, then they would have different ID fields, even though the first and last name are the same. So that would flag them as being actually different persons. That answers your question.
Okay. And is the assumption that the two different meters for the same identified person aggregated reflect that person's usage?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. So as I understand it, if you use the customer ID and first and last names to identify if meters are associated with the same person, correct?
I did not use first and last name. I mean, I used the ID value. I did not use first and last names at all during my analysis.
Okay. Is the assumption then that multiple meters associated with the same customer ID number aggregated, so you add those meters usage together, that reflects that one individual's usage?
Yes, it does. That was, yeah.
And so I it seems to make sense if there's multiple meters on one home or residence. Less so if these are scattered right around the city. Did you do anything to account for whether there's a meter on the east side and a meter on the west side, and whether or not it makes sense to assume that those are both the usage of one individual?
Well, they are the usage of the individual if that is the person on the account paying for the bills.
Okay, so the assumption is that whoever's paying for the bills is the user, the energy user at that location?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no way to account for landlords being the billed entity with tenants actually being the users of the energy at that location?
I guess I should clarify. I mean, the bills can be sent somewhere else, but the person ID is the person responsible for the bill. So yes, I mean, if it were a landlord on there, they would show up as the person on that account.
I'm sorry, if it were
if it were a landlord listed as the person.
thank you.
Yeah.
So you'd be identifying the usage of say the house or the apartment with the landlord in that scenario you just described, correct?
Correct.
And is there any way to determine whether multiple roommates may be users, and one and only one of those being on the bill?
I'm not sure if there is a way. My analysis would only consider the person on the bill. It doesn't, when we talk about customers, we talk about typically meters or people paying, not population.
Okay, but the population are the users of the energy at at the location, correct?
I guess, yes. I mean, they all use it.
Let's talk about the next step in your analysis. So I understand you matched the billed entity, the billed person, with an income level for that person. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the income information you obtained from,
Can I clarify? The incomes are household incomes. So the total household income tied to the primary person of the household. So in a primary person in a spouse situation, it would be the combined income tied to just one of the individuals to represent that household.
okay. And when we say household, we're actually talking about the billed entity.
That is my understanding.
Okay. So when we just talked about a landlord who may receive a bill, not living at the apartment or house where the meter is located, in that scenario, you'd end up identifying the income of the landlord, correct?
Correct.
The data you have on income is from an outside vendor. I would pronounce Axiom. Is that correct?
That's my best understanding of how to pronounce it.
Okay.
Hang on, just off the record, can you spell that for the record when we get back on?
Yes, I believe it is spelled ACXIOM.
Okay,
That's how it's spelled in the testimony.
perfect. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Deneau, do you know how the company, Madison Gas and Electric, obtains the information from Axiom?
I am not involved in the process. Is my understanding that we purchase the data set from them annually.
Okay. And does the data set have specific incomes associated with specific people?
It has what it calls narrow household income ranges associated with an individual. Associated are with a person.
A narrow household income range, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And how big of a range is that?
Typically it's about $10,000 a year.
So it would show up, for example, as between 50 and 60,000.
That would be a typical range. I don't know if that's an exact one of their ranges off the top of my head, but yes, something like that.
Do you know how Axiom identifies or determines income range for people?
I do not.
Have you or has the company done any quality control to determine whether those data are accurate?
I do not know if any quality control has been done by others. I have not performed any myself.
Are the income data specific to a name or to an address or with some other indicator?
It was specific. They would have income data tied to a person, and they would also attempt to supply an address for that person.
Okay, did you cross-check I think you said early in your testimony that you did not calculate energy usage based on first and last names. You used a customer ID. Did you attempt to cross-check the income information, first and last name, with the customer first and last name to make sure that the income data were referring to the same person that your energy use calculations assumed?
Axiom does that for us as part of their service. They tie all of their information to our customer IDs so that we do not have to verify that match on our end.
Okay. Is there any quality control of that matching by Axiom?
I don't know that process.
So is that a no? To your understanding, there's no quality control check by Madison Gas to make sure that Axiom correctly identifies its customers?
I think that was two different questions. If I understood it, first you were asking if Axiom did the quality control. And I think your second question there was whether or not MGE was checking whether or not Axiom did quality control.
Yeah, but I can ask both of those questions in sequence then.
Yes, please.
Mr. Deneau, are you aware of whether Axiom does any quality control to ensure that it is correctly identifying customers at their address in the company's service territory?
I'm not aware of their process.
Okay. Are you aware of whether the utility does any quality control to make sure that Axiom has correctly identified its customers at the addresses associated with the utility's customers?
I'm not familiar with our process.
So that's, you're not aware of any quality control. Is that your testimony?
Yes, I'm not aware of any, or I don't know if it exists or does not exist.
As I understand your analysis, Axiom sometimes has multiple data points for a customer or a customer address. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, they sometimes have multiple data points for a customer. To the best of my knowledge, they do not have multiple data points for the combination of a customer and an address.
Okay, and as we talked about, their data points are actually $10,000 ranges, correct?
That is one of their data points, yes.
Okay, is that the data point that you referred to on page 4, line 15? When you talk about the where you had multiple, so I'm looking at your testimony, page 4, starting on line 13. You say occasionally Axiom data had multiple entries for a single customer. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So is that referring to multiple $10,000 ranges for a single customer?
It could also simply reference that they had the same $10,000 range entered for a customer twice, one for each of their premises.
Okay. How many, you say occasionally in your testimony, do you know how many customers there were multiple data points for?
I don't know what that number is. I'd have to review.
Okay.
Yeah, off the record. So for some reason, your voice dropped out. Maybe just if you could just speak towards the microphone, that might be useful. So let's just have you repeat the last answer on the record. Let's go ahead.
I don't know how many multiples there are. I'd have to review.
As I understand from your testimony, when there were multiple data points for a customer, your analysis assumed the highest of the data points. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And as I understand from your testimony today, the data points are actually $10,000 ranges. The federal poverty guidelines, though, have kind of cutoff points, correct? So it's a single dollar kind of threshold between above and below the federal poverty guideline.
Correct. Segmented by person, number of persons in household. Yes.
So when you did your calculation to determine kind of these buckets of poverty rate 1.5 times and 2 times, did you use the higher end or the lower end of the $10,000 range provided by Axiom?
I used the middle of the range. I will say then their top range was 150,000 or greater. I assumed 200,000 for that range because it did not have a max cap. But that should not affect the results of this analysis.
And then there were also 34.26% of customers for which Axiom had no data. Is that correct?
Did you say 34.26?
I did say that, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know why there were no data for those customers?
I don't know why there's no data.
Do you know how Axiom collects income data or determines income data?
I do not.
So you do not know whether the 34%, slightly more than 34%, for which you have no data are equally dispersed among all customers, or if they tend towards one or the other income distribution?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. He's already answered the question by saying he doesn't know.
Yes, okay, I'll sustain that objection.
Well, let me ask it a different way then, Mr. Ju. You know whether the 34.26% for which you do not have income data are equally dispersed among income levels?
I don't know.
Have you looked at where physically, what addresses are associated with the 34.26% for which you have no income data?
I have not.
Thank you. I have nothing further for this witness.
Okay. All right, other cross? How about redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, thanks. So yeah, so I'm glad we got those questions. I guess I had kind of missed the concept that the company's relying on this Axiom data. Just want to point out that for Renew, I was able to catch the introduction of the EQ report and required that the author of the EQ report verify and explain that report. I mean, this came in a little bit later, the reference to Axiom. I suppose I would have been beneficial to have an Axiom, someone in Axiom to explain the basis for the reporting that it provides MGE to clarify the record. However, on the other hand, we didn't actually, no report from Axiom was being offered for the record. So that kind of leans the other way to saying that wasn't necessary. But I just want to point out, in case people do see the discrepancy there, both based on timing of the filings and the fact that there was no Axiom report offered for the record, that they were treated differently. However, I think the cross-examination questions did elucidate some information about the basis for Axiom's numbers. So I think the record is complete on that respect. Okay, so let's move on. So there's no redirect, so we can excuse witness Danu. Thanks very much. I think that's all of MGE's witnesses.
That is correct, Your Honor.
Right. So we do have a number of witnesses still. I'd be willing to entertain half an hour break if people are interested. I think there are going to be a number of questions coming up. Does that sound good? All right, so let's try to meet back. Let's make it a real 30 minutes. So we'll get back at 20 after 12. Thanks, everybody. See you then. Okay, Mon, are you there? Now what do we do?
Well, everyone turns off the webcam and it will show whatever you have on the screen.
Okay. So, I should probably have like a message or something.
That's one possibility, yeah.
Hey, good idea. Great.
Well, it doesn't have to be fancy, just type something quick
Yeah.
in Word.
Sounds good. I'll do that. And then, yeah, that's fine. So just in terms of the actual video, just be like, I mean, we're not able to put like flags or tags on the recording. Are we to say like skip to, 20 minutes from now? Or I guess we kind of did already on the record. That's
we can talk about it further later, but there is ability to put chapters. The bookmarks, basically you can click on it, it'll jump to a certain time stamp on the video.
Got it.
But that has to be done after the stream is over.
Okay, well, that might be a little bit more than we can handle for every case. Okay, that's fine. Okay, well, so I'll just mute and stop the video, and then we'll be like dead air for a while. That doesn't seem right to me to have dead air, but that's okay.
It happens. Yeah, if you leave a message on your screen share saying we'll be back at 12:20.
Okay, sounds good. Great, thanks.
Yep.
right, well, let's get started. So we're waiting for a few more people to join us. So let's begin off the record. Now we have Kavita Manny just joined us by phone. I did want to speak to her briefly about her connection. So witness Manny, can you hear me?
Yes, Your Honor, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Okay, great. So I'm still wondering if there may be a way to connect your video to the hearing. Are you using a cell phone, a smartphone for your connection?
Yes, Your Honor, I do have an iPhone, but I live out in the country, and that's one of the reasons I was feeling a bit nervous to do that and try and focus on if any questions were being asked of me. I really am at a loss right now, but
okay.
I'm committed to buying something new and better so that I don't have this problem.
That's fine. I just thought if we had if you had, could connect through your phone, then, but if you're having issues with your internet connection, that's another reason not to experiment too much with that.
Your Honor, Steve Hines in here.
Sure.
And if no one has cross for Miss Maney, I could just ask that her testimony come in by affidavit, and then she went. It wouldn't matter really if she was on camera or not today. So if you would like to do that, that would be just fine with us.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I should have asked before we went to recess, see how many witnesses we have left, but I'm sure everyone appreciated the break either way. So let's do that then before we get started. Are there, do we have witnesses we can excuse on the list of interveners and commission staff? So any cross-examination for the remaining witnesses?
Your Honor, this is Steve for Week, and I have a few questions for Mr. Field of staff.
Yes.
Your Honor, I'll have a couple of questions for Mr. Singletary, but that's it.
Okay.
Your Honor, we may have a question for Mr. Barnes.
Yes, well, yeah, we have to take Mr. Barnes for sure. Okay. All right, so it's Manny, Eider, Malay, Kell. Those are all people we could excuse. Yeah. Okay. So I did have some questions for witness Malley with respect to the Inflation Reduction Act, and I don't know if staff has any comment on that in terms of the process. If that's something you were going to ask.
Your Honor, we're going to allow you to ask it. Okay. If you wanted to, I can always ask it as well, but we do have a response.
Okay.
And then generally speaking, I think in terms of excusing witnesses or having testimony verified by affidavit, I think we'll have the staff witnesses still appear to verify their testimony. It just, we have everyone on anyway. So.
Yep. Okay, so then we're just looking at Kell and Manny, correct? All right, so let's get on the record.
And I'm sorry, excuse me, Your Honor, Enfield.
Oh, yes, I understand. Okay, so let's get on the record. We've just discussed any remaining cross-examination or direct testimony, for that matter, from the remaining witnesses in the case, and it appears that we have no questions for Kell and witness Kell and witness Manny. So I believe I can receive those documents, their filings through with verification by affidavit. So they're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes. And just go off the record one more time. So I'm looking at the MGE connection here. Things have been working very well in terms of the sound quality and video. There's only one quirk, a new one, because of our YouTube connection here, our YouTube live stream. So something we didn't anticipate is that the person that appears on the screen when they're on YouTube is the person speaking. So in the case of MGE, that's been just basically a blank screen because the microphone's running through Scott Smith's computer. So there's no one appearing when MGE person is speaking. So I believe we'll only have Attorney Kleinmeyer speaking for MGE at this point. So is there a way to either have, if you could use Scott Smith's computer or switch the microphone to your computer?
Yeah. I'm looking at Scott. It looks like microphone over to me.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it was something I didn't want to interrupt because of that, but it was kind of an awkward situation there where you guys were just blank screen. So,
Your Honor, if I might interrupt.
Does this work, Your Honor?
No, you're still on Scott Smith's microphone.
Okay,
We gotta switch.
Yeah, so if you just want to move the laptops, if that helps, then I can just change the name.
Can you hear me now?
I can, but you're still on Scott's computer.
Why don't we just, I'll just go over to your computer.
Yep.
One second.
That's fine. Yeah, it's a crazy. I did not think about that until I saw it. I'm just going to change designation. So I can. So if you could turn Scott's computer on video. Okay, while they work on that, we're off the record. Did you have a comment, Attorney Fikes?
Yes, Your Honor. Due to logistical concerns, we were hoping to verify Mr. Kell's testimony live as well.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. It's up to you. At this point, it's your discretion. Yeah. Okay, so sorry about that. I'm glad that was not too bad of a fix. But so I'm going to stop the video from the original Kleinmeyer connection. Here we go. Perfect. And let's just test out your mic there, Brian.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. All right, excellent. So I think that's going to work. All right. Okay, so I think we have Cub next. So let's hear me, Your Honor. Yes, very well. Okay. It's got the state of the art there. I love. So let's get on the record. Let me swear you in first. So raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Go ahead.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Corey Singletary, Corey Singletary.
Okay, in this proceeding, did you prepare and file or cause to be filed direct rebuttal and serve rebuttal testimony?
I did.
And is that testimony true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
It is.
Do you have anything to add to your testimony at this time?
Not at this time.
Your Honor, Mr. Singletary is available for cross-examination.
Okay, so we have questions from Sierra Club, I believe. Any other parties, staff? Oh, all right, well, go ahead, Attorney Bender.
Good afternoon, Mr. Singletary. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I just have a couple of questions for you. In Mr. Kell's testimony, he identified you as the main author of the list of customer costs included in attachment D to the settlement agreement in the prior phase of this case. Is that correct?
That would be an accurate description, yes.
Okay. And that document has a list of FERC accounts, essentially, that are included in a basic customer cost methodology. Can you explain how you came up with that list of FERC accounts being customer costs?
Yes, and the one thing I would like to add too is there was some discussion earlier today about the costs that go into each one of those accounts and what can be booked under each one of those accounts. And I'm sure that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has their own set of definitions, but the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin has also adopted a uniform system of accounts that has detailed descriptions of what can be booked under each one of those accounts. So if that's helpful for the purposes of this record. Returning to your question of how I arrived at that specific set of accounts, the way I approached it is to think of it this way. What set of costs would a utility incur solely as a function of a customer being added to the utility system, of a customer being interconnected as a new customer, or conversely, what cost would a utility avoid if a customer were ceased being a customer of the utility, were to leave the utility?
Okay, so then that was kind of you came up with this list of FERC accounts on your own. This wasn't referenced from any other kind of source material. Is that what you're saying?
It is based off of my decade plus of cost allocation experience, both working with other commission staff at the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, as well as collaborating and speaking with other rate analysts in other jurisdictions regarding this basic customer cost approach, which as a foundational sort of theoretical basis uses the description that I just used. I did not come up with this all on my own.
Fair enough. I'm just making sure that it's not, directly from Bone Bright or some other secondary source that we could kind of pull from the shelf. And that's consistent with your testimony, I think. The definition you gave, what the test you applied for identifying customer costs were costs that go up by adding a customer to the system, or conversely would reduce by removing a customer from the system, correct?
Yes.
Did you do any kind of regression analysis or any other kind of analysis to determine whether these costs actually do increase or decrease proportionate to changes in customer count?
No, the selection of these costs was based off of basic cost causation theory.
Okay, so let's look at a couple to understand.
Sure.
So one of the costs if it's helpful, Your Honor, this is in the attachment which is to the settlement, which is attached to the final decision, which I sent to the parties, and specifically on PDF, page 197 of that document.
Okay, just a second here. Let's go off the record while I take through my emails and then find a decision. What's the page number again?
The PDF file is page 197.
All right, I didn't. And just so we know, I think just do this off the record. So this is attached to the final decision. So of course it's citable in this case, or I guess any other case, as a document included in a commission order. So So we won't need to do any further, identification or filing of that. But I think, am I where you want to be?
Yeah, I do have one clarifying question. Maybe Party's going to help me with, because I see this while we're off the record. I see the same, what looks to me the same document at 197 and 198. Like there's two copies of it in there. At least I haven't been able to see any difference. So if I should be using one versus the other, I'm happy to do that. I don't know which is the correct version.
That's interesting. Yeah, well, we've already said, I think you've identified 197 on the record so far. So let's just stick to 197. And there's really no other label on it except that it's attachment D. So it's at the first page. No, it's just attachment D. Okay, so if you just want to keep your references to attachment D, that should probably be the best way to handle it.
Okay.
All right, so let's get back on the record. So I think we're at attachment D of the final order in the previous portion of this proceeding. So go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Singletary, so this is attachment D that we previously identified as you as the primary author of as part of the settlement process, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if I'm looking, I see on the electric plant side, includes distribution plant electric expense, some customer account expenses, and customer service and informational expenses. Do you see those categories?
I do.
Okay. I'm looking, we're just talking about costs and whether or not they kind of go up or down proportionate to customer costs or customer count of the utility. For example, account 909, information and instructional advertising expense. Do you know, for example, whether that has increased for the company over the years proportionate to the number of customers of the company?
I know it has increased over time. As to your specific question, whether or not it has increased proportionate to the number of customers, could you clarify your question for me, please?
Sure. Let me back up. So I can see conceptually how metering costs are directly proportionate because every customer is going to have his or her own meter, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so, but some of these other costs, it seems like are less clear. And so I'm trying to understand how one can determine, or how you specifically determined that these costs are increase proportionate to, or conversely decrease proportionate to, number of customers.
So as I mentioned earlier, the definition for what goes into 909 is really more than those 5 words. The commission in its uniform system of accounts states that account 909 says that this account shall include the cost of labor, materials used, and expenses incurred in activities which primarily convey information as to what the utility urges or suggests customers should do in utilizing electric service to protect their health and safety, to encourage environmental protection, to utilize their electric equipment safely and economically, or to conserve electric energy. So when I developed this list of accounts, I looked at it from the standpoint of, is this account, or are the costs that are allowed to be booked under this account directly related to the service a customer receives from the standpoint of, sort of your standard considerations of safety, reliability, and the actual electricity service, the electrons, as we often refer to, that are delivered to the customer. And it was my assessment that those were more directly related to the provision of electric utility service, and that they would, on a long run marginal cost basis, vary by customer.
Yeah. So that's your assumption. But I think you said you did no analysis to determine, you didn't conduct a marginal cost study, and you didn't conduct a regression analysis to determine whether those costs actually do change with changes in customers. Okay.
No, I did not.
And I had one more question or clarification for you, Mr. Singletary. Commissioner Huebner's concurring opinion, which is part of the same file, I think on page 81 of the PDF, identifies some customer costs. Can you see that?
Give me a moment. If you're referring to the first paragraph on the page that I believe you're referring to, then yes, I see a discussion there.
I just want to make clear that this category of costs in the paragraph that Commissioner Huebner identifies as metering and meter reading, billing, and basic customer connection dedicated to a single customer, i.e. the service drop or service lateral. That's a narrower range of costs than you included in the attachment D to the settlement. Is that correct?
It depends on how you interpret what the commissioner's intent was here, because certainly metering and meter reading is a little bit clearer in terms of lining those up with specific accounts within the uniform system of accounts. When we get to billing and quote, the basic customer connection dedicated to a single customer, he cites the service drop and service lateral, but really more that first part of billing. I think you could probably get differences of opinion as to what that would refer to. And like I said, the count you referred to earlier is under the group of costs in the uniform system of accounts of customer service, which is distinguished from sales. So, as is often my testimony, but wasn't in this proceeding, cost allocation ultimately comes down to an exercise of judgment on the part of not only the rate analyst, but also the commission. So it really, there is some interpretation potentially here in terms of exactly what accounts within the uniform system of accounts apply to this specific anecdote, I would say qualitative description of cost categories. But potentially, yes, to your question, could it be narrower? Sure.
Okay. And my point of my question is just when you were developing your list of FERC accounts to include in attachment D, you were not trying to limit yourself to the list identified in Commissioner Huebner's concurring opinion or to the, I guess, prior PSC orders that he's referring to, right? You did your analysis kind of separate from whatever that history was at the commission.
Well, his list didn't exist at the time that I prepared the list. So yes, I did not refer to his list. And no, I did not base it off of any specific commission practice final decisions. No.
Okay. That's my only questions for this witness. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, witness Singletary, in your answering of Attorney Bender's questions regarding the customer accounts expense on attachment D. So you related that back to electric service. Would your answers equally apply to natural gas service?
Yeah, they're the same accounts. That's why the table is set up the way that it is. It applies across both service types. That across those two service types, the accounts are uniform within the uniform system accounts, but the plant and expense accounts differ by service type.
Okay, thanks. All right, so other cross. We can have redirect.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay. So our next witness, well, we can take, that's all we have for Cub, so we can take Renew. So we'll get both of their witnesses. It's up to you what order you want to take them.
Thank you, Your Honor. Renew would call Andrew Kell to the stand.
All right, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kell. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, Andrew Kell, ANDREWKELL.
Thank you. And could you please state the name of the party that you represent in this proceeding?
Yes, Renew Wisconsin.
Okay, Mr. Kell, did you prepare and cause to be filed direct testimony with 3 accompanying exhibits and surrebuttal testimony in this case?
Yes, I did.
And is that testimony true and correct as of the time it was written to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any corrections to your testimony?
Yes, I'll be working with counsel to file corrections to both my direct and surrebuttal testimony. My direct testimony will need to, instead of refer to Exhibit Renew Kell, refer to Exhibit Renew Barnes 1. And my surrebuttal testimony will need to refer to new supplemental rebuttal filed by Mr. Deneau of MGE and the analysis provided in the exhibit that Mr. Deneau provided as well.
Thank you. And with the exception of those corrections that you identified, if I ask you the same questions today, would your answers to those questions be the same?
Yes, they would.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kell. Your Honor, the witness is available for cross-examination.
Okay, do we have any questions at the moment? Didn't think there were. Okay. All right, thanks very much. You're excused.
Thank you.
And next, Renew would call its second witness, Justin Barnes.
All right, see you there. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Barnes. Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Justin Barnes, JUSTIN BARNES.
Thank you. And by whom are you employed?
EQ Research LLC.
Could you please provide EQ Research's business address?
It's 1155 Kildare Farm Road, Suite 203, Cary, North Carolina. Kildare is spelled KILDAIRE.
Thank you. And what is your position at EQ Research?
I'm the Director of Research.
And what do you do as the Director of Research?
Among other things, I coordinate and contribute to EQ Research's various research projects for clients. I oversee our electric industry regulatory and general rate case tracking services, and I also perform customized research and analysis upon client requests.
Thank you. And could you please state the name of the party that you represent in this proceeding?
Renew Wisconsin.
Thank you. And have you testified in a utility rate case proceeding before the commission?
No, I haven't testified before the Wisconsin Public Service Commission previously, but I have testified before numerous state utility commissions on issues related to clean energy policy, rate design, cost of service. I've presented fairly similar information to what I'm sponsoring here in a number of those other proceedings.
Okay, Mr. Barnes, did you prepare the exhibit referenced in the direct testimony of Andrew Kell and marked Exhibit Renew Barnes 1, which is titled EQ Research LLC Report on Residential Fixed Charges of Large IOUs Across the United States?
Yes, I did.
And at whose direction was this report prepared?
It was prepared at the direction of Renew witness Andrew Kell.
And are you prepared to discuss the assumptions and methodology used to create the report and sponsor the report as an exhibit?
I am.
Okay. As part of that methodology, did you verify the accuracy of the data by reviewing each individual utility tariff?
Yes, I did. The data set contained in the report is current as of June 8th, 2022.
Okay, so the report is true and correct as of the time it was prepared to the best of your knowledge?
It is.
Okay. Do you have any corrections to the report?
I do not.
Okay, backing up a little, can you please describe EQ Research LLC and what they do?
Sure. EQ Research provides policy research, analysis, and data services to businesses active in renewables, energy efficiency, energy storage, and electric vehicles, basically clean energy. We provide expert witness testimony, principally myself, but a few others occasionally. I would say our areas of expertise include state regulatory policy and legislation, clean energy financial incentives, renewable energy policy in general, net metering, rate design, kind of the whole suite of clean energy type topics.
Okay, could you please describe the EQ report referenced in Mr. Kell's testimony and its creation?
Sure. EQ maintains a data set of utility proposals for changes to residential fixed charges, and also kind of the outcomes in general rate case proceedings. That's part of the EQ Research Policy Vista General Rate Case Database and subscription service. So one portion of that data set is a list of current fixed charges, which is something we periodically review to capture things like phased in changes, changes that take place outside of general rate cases, and to do kind of cleaning to incorporate other things that occur in the utility space, like utility mergers. So Renew requested that EQ provide a report of current residential customer charges from IOUs across the country. And I'd recently completed a comprehensive review of the residential fixed charge data set, and I provided the updated data set to Renew.
Okay, thank you. How did you compile data for the EQ report?
Well, the core data set is based primarily on proposals and outcomes in general rate cases. But like I said, as part of the comprehensive review I did, I verified the accuracy of the data by reviewing each individual utility tariff.
Okay. And what is the definition of fixed charge for the EQ report?
The fixed charges reflected in the data refer to a monthly fixed charge, sometimes referred to as a customer charge or a basic facilities charge, that applies to a standard or default utility tariff for the residential class. So in a small number of instances where there's kind of more than one standard rate, where you have like a tiered fixed charge based on monthly usage, the rate that would apply to most residential customers is used in the data set. The charges that are listed don't include any separate minimum monthly bills that are different from the fixed charge, although it does have some footnotes that note utilities that do have separate minimum bills. It also doesn't include additional fixed charges that might be applied as riders that use a fixed charge or percentage of bill-based design, nor does it include kind of the reverse of that, any fixed rate credits or refunds that might also be applied in riders. Because it's based on, kind of a current review as of June 8th, 2022 of tariff charges, the rates that are listed in it, they could be like interim rates that are subject to future revision and refund, or they could just be the standard rate that's not subject to any modification of that type.
Okay, and which utilities are included in the data set you used?
So it includes all IOUs that had more than 20,000 total customers as of 2020, based on the US EIA's Form 861 data, as well as a number of utilities that had less than 20,000 total customers during 2020. Multi-jurisdictional utilities are listed separately in each state in which they operate a regulated subsidiary. Most of the utilities in the data set that have fewer than 20,000 total customers are affiliates of a utility that EQ reviewed a rate case filing for at some point in the past. And those were just kind of selected based on ease of access, where we could kind of readily and easily verify that the information was correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barnes. Your Honor, the witness is available for cross-examination if there is any.
Okay. Any questions for the witness?
Your Honor, MGE just has one question.
Sure, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Barnes. My name is Brian Kleinmeyer. I'm counsel for MGE. I just had one question for you. Do you have your, and this isn't the question. Do you have your Exhibit 1 in front of you?
I do. I have it beside me.
Okay. So all of the fixed charges identified in your exhibit were approved by a governmental agency with regulatory authority over the amount of the fixed charge. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thanks. Anyone else? All right, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Witness Barnes, for your participation and last minute appearance. I do appreciate your you making it to the hearing. And at this point, you're excused. So take care.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so we have Kell and Barnes. I believe we're going to skip to commission staff. Who do you want to call that first?
Your Honor, the commission would call Andrew Eider to the stand.
Okay. There you are. Okay, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I think we're having trouble hearing you. Doesn't look like you're muted.
How about now?
Ah, perfect.
There we go.
Yes, those headphones are tricky. All right, so can you answer well, let's just do it over again. Do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Please state your name for the record.
Andrew Eider.
And what is your position at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin?
I'm a public utility rate analyst.
And how are you involved in this docket?
I have submitted testimony involved in the electric rate design.
Did that testimony include direct testimony, surrebuttal testimony, and an errata to your direct testimony?
Yes, it does.
And are the statements and representations in that testimony that you filed true and correct?
Yes.
Do you have any additions or modifications to your testimony at this time?
I do not.
Your Honor, the witness is available for cross.
Any questions? No, they wasn't expecting that. Okay, great. Thanks very much. You're excused.
Great. Thank you.
Next, Your Honor, the commission would call Andrew Field to the stand.
All right, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Please state your name for the record.
Andrew Field.
What is your position at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin?
I am a public utility auditor.
And how are you involved in this docket?
I reviewed the monitored fuel component.
Did you file or cause to be filed direct testimony and surrebuttal testimony in this docket?
Yes, I did.
Did you also file or cause to be filed an exhibit marked Exhibit PSC Field 1 in this docket?
Yes, I did.
And are the statements and representations in your testimony and the exhibit you filed in this case true and correct?
Yes, they are.
Do you have any additions or modifications to your testimony or exhibit at this time?
I do not at this time.
Your Honor, the witness is available for cross.
Okay, any questions?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right. Hi, Mr. Field. Steve Heinzen for Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group. Were you here this morning when I cross-examined Mr. Weinert for MGE?
Yes, I was.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you just real similar questions. And all I'm trying to understand is the process, I think, more than anything, of the I guess the audit and then the update of the fuel costs. So I'll just begin. Can you tell me the date that commission staff ran or had MGE run the production fuel cost model as part of its audit?
Which model run are you referring to?
The one that was used for the audit, or the one that maybe there were more than one that used the one that is reflected in the staff's audit.
You mean the one that is reflected in my exhibit?
Yes.
Okay.
can't recall the exact date. That model run was performed sometime towards the end of June.
I noticed in the testimony, I believe that the NYMEX strip for June 13th or something like that was used. So it had to be after that date, I take it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. There was a data request when the specific adjustments to be run through the model was sent out, and there is a date on there. I don't recall the exact date off the top of my head.
That's fine. Thank you. If you turn, do you have your direct testimony in front of you?
Put that on the screen.
Okay, and do you have it? Do you have it in front of you now? I'm looking at page 7. So my question is, I'm just trying to understand how the bid adders were or were not in the several fuel runs.
Right. I believe the testimony up now is.
Oh, you're right. It's not yours. You're right. Let's go off the record. I'm working too quickly here. So direct field, yes.
Yes, yeah. Direct PSC field 7.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the question here involves the bid adders for Columbia and Elm Road. And I'm first curious about the line that begins, or the sentence that begins at line 22. The adjusted production fuel cost model results. And why don't you read through the end of that paragraph, which ends on field 8, and then I'll ask you questions about it.
Okay, aloud or to myself?
No, to yourself is fine.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so my first question is just, what is the adjusted production fuel cost model?
That would be the updated model run. That would be the update to the initially filed. The applicant initially filed a model run results, and as part of the audit process, it was reviewed. And at the end of that review, we had a list of adjustments to be made to that model, and the adjusted production fuel cost model results refer to the adjusted results as presented in my exhibit.
Okay, and so the way that works, I guess, is that staff comes up with the changes or the adjustment, and then asks MGE in this case to rerun its model with this new data. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. What I would try to, so as you saw at the end of that paragraph, you just note that MGE, it sounds like MGE wanted to run that updated model by including a net, or I guess a total of $34.8 million that were tied to, or the result of bid adders for Columbia and Elm Road. Is that right? Do I understand that right?
So the way this works is there are several iterations run for the model, and each adjustment is its own iteration. And so in my exhibit, each of those individual iterations are shown, which shows the dollar amount of each individual iteration or adjustment.
Okay.
And when the applicant provided the adjusted model runs, there was an additional adjustment that's not shown in my current exhibit that was not accepted by PSC and therefore not included in the exhibit. And that was the dollar value of that rejected adjustment.
Okay. And that was 34. And if it had been accepted, the fuel cost for MGE would have been $34.8 million higher.
Yes.
Okay. Then as you, I guess, looking through your testimony a little bit further, at page 8 of your direct testimony, beginning at line 19 through line 4 on page 9, there is a reference to an increase in fuel costs related to a power and light conversation, at least, of 16.3 million for a bid adder. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. When that 16.3 million is not included in your fuel cost run and exhibit either, correct?
Correct. That dollar amount is not included in the exhibit.
Okay. So when you when MGE first the results were that the bid adder would be 34.8 million, and subsequently conversation with Power and Light indicates that for Columbia, at least, the bid adder would add 16.3 million. I guess over the summertime, did you anticipate, or did staff anticipate that there was a bid adder, there would be a bid adder, just didn't know what that number was going to be?
Yes, that's correct. The in my testimony, I refer to the need to update the bid adders as part of the final model run, because we did anticipate that some update was going to be necessary. We just disagreed with the update that was presented to us.
Okay, right. And so in the fuel forecast, is there any bid adder at all? And that would be staff's run that appears in the audit. Is there any bid adder related to Columbia and Elm Road?
In the initially filed run, I believe there were some bid adders in the initially filed run. It was what we rejected in the updated run was just the update to those bid adders.
Okay, so then is it fair to say that the additional bid adder that was suggested by MGE was greater than you thought was likely to be the case, but you also thought that there was likely to be some additional increase to the bid adder that would be necessary?
Yes.
Do you have a sense now what you think is a likely bid adder for those two units if it was to be run today?
I could not predict a specific dollar amount. I mean, that it's a complex calculation and we would need a model run.
Do you think it's likely to be somewhere between 16.3 and the 34.8 million?
I could not answer that at this time.
Okay. If you would turn to field 7, line 5. I think this is going to be just my last couple of questions here for you. And the question is, what additional updates are proposed for the final production fuel cost model run? And I'm curious about this is, you said that additional updates are proposed to be included in the final production fuel cost model run that are not yet incorporated into commission staff 2023 fuel costs for the applicant. And just want to focus, I guess, on the are not yet incorporated. Are you, and my question here is, are you saying that there are categories of fuel costs that will be brought into the fuel forecast, but at the moment, there are no numbers associated with those categories? Or does it simply refer to the number has to be updated?
It refers to the number has to be updated.
Okay, so then it would be the case that we talked about the bid adders, that they're in your fuel cost forecast that's part of the audit. There is a number associated with the Columbia Unit 2 outage. Is that right?
There are numbers associated with the outage and maintenance schedule.
Okay. And so, and Paris solar and battery profile, similarly, that your forecast reflected some modification to the fuel forecast that MGE filed, and now we just need to re-up that after, I guess, at some point before the commission has its open hearing, open meeting.
Yes, for Paris, there is an update necessary to the generation profile based on information received about when the project will be completed.
And does staff have that information right now? And it just is not yet part of the fuel forecast?
An adjustment will be needed to the profile based on the information we have. We don't know what the exact generation profile will be. We just know that there will be an adjustment to exactly what the generation profile looks like.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, other cross? Okay, I think I've gotten more confused as we've gone, as we've proceeded. But it'd be just me. I guess I do have a couple questions related to this testimony, but also I'm not sure if this is the nature of these cases, that the experts seem to understand it all, but when we're trying to present the issues to the commissioners, we just may need to step back a bit and just do a little bit more background. And I think, or maybe it's just me, maybe I'm the only one who doesn't understand this, but I just am a little uncomfortable just letting this go the way it is. And I just, as a general sense, I think I'm just curious about probably the best way to introduce this line of questioning is just to focus on this paragraph that we were just talking about, the updates that that are expected, I suppose. And in terms of and I guess are there some updates, do you know, that will be the result of a commission order that's issued, we hope or expect to come out before the MGE fuel cost plan is issued, and then the determinations the commission makes can be used as an input to those as the update that can be used as an input to the model runs. So for example, like the bid adders for Columbia, I assume they'll be approved in Wisconsin Power and Light's fuel cost plan case, which is also pending alongside this case. Are we expecting to wait until we know what the bid adder is and then use it and then have MGE run that bid adder into its model to come up with the final production fuel cost?
Well, the information we're using there are actually the main issue with the bid adders is the expectation for how much coal is going to be available. And the bid adders need to be adjusted such that the model shows Columbia burning that approximate amount of coal.
Uh-huh. But that determination can be made independently for Wisconsin Power and Light versus MGE.
The expectation for how much coal will be available is based on discussion with Power and Light as the operator of the plant and between the various co-owners to make sure they're on the same page in terms of expected volume of coal that will be available.
So, okay. So if that changes over the course of time, potentially, if say MGE's hearing is today and Power and Light's hearings next week, so MGE may get this update before Wisconsin Power and Light does. Does that make any sense? I mean, can these numbers be different in the different cases, or are we going to have to wait for an answer from Wisconsin Power and Light with their discussions of the coal suppliers?
I anticipate, having a conversation with Power and Light that involves MGE, and I anticipate using the same most recently available assumption for coal deliveries. I would anticipate they would be the same across all the co-owners.
Okay.
The bid adders themselves are sort of inputs to the model to get the model to a certain coal burn.
Okay. And then so there's also, so now, is there any information you can give in terms of an update in terms of the so I just let me just back up just to get a definitional understanding. When is coal conservation and bid adders synonymous? I mean, is the idea of the concept of conserving coal, it's reflected in a fuel cost model simply by the bid adder. Is that correct?
Again, we have to start. We have to based on the information on rail deliveries and what is expected to be coming in. We have a certain number of tons of coal that's expected, and the bid adders in the dispatch model are sort of the input used to get to that level of coal burn. And the specific bid adder it takes to get to a certain amount of coal burn will also be affected by things like market prices for power and natural gas and all of those NYMEX issues as well.
Okay, I see. But if the only way that we can adjust the fuel cost plan to in response to a concern about coal supply would be manipulating the bid adder. The other, how that bid adder then flows through the model would be something else that, you know, would be a result of the model. But in terms of manipulating an input to the model, it's the bid adder that we'd be looking at changing to get to a fuel burn amount that we're looking for.
Yes, as the bid adders are just an addition to the dispatch price in the model, and the more the bid adder is raised, the higher the plant's dispatch price, which would mean the less it will run.
Okay. And so then the rest of that sentence on your direct page 7, or just continue down to lines 11 and 12. We're talking about West Riverside. The docket number cited you have is 5BS 265. So is that a determination the commission would need to make that would then become an input into updating the potential West Riverside changes, whatever those are?
Yes, in my exhibit, I believe it was the first adjustment was for West Riverside.
Okay.
There's 5BS 265 is a docket where MGE is seeking to purchase a partial ownership share of West Riverside. And that ownership was included in the initial filing. However, the commission has not made a decision in that docket yet. So until a decision has been made in that docket, any assumptions we're not assuming a decision in our current numbers, basically.
Okay, so it is adjusted. So in field exhibit PSC field 1, there's a number included. I'll just put that on the screen. There's a number included, line 1 for a remove. Okay, never mind. Okay, good. That's consistent with what I expected. Okay, so okay, so then yeah, there was just one other. So I just wanted to be clear in terms of staff's perspective about the fuel cost plans. And there's a certain time frame where information comes into play and gets collected to be used for the final cost model run. Is that occur before the commission reviews the record in the case?
I am not sure on that.
Okay.
I anticipated having this discussion prior to the discussion of record.
Okay. And so my understanding of the process is that usually it's when we're looking simply at the NYMEX updates, we take a mid-month NYMEX closing price that's prior to the commission decision, the commission's discussion of the record. and then that's used to come up with whatever gets adjusted through those updates. And then I am assuming that's what gets presented for commission discussion of the record. Is that your understanding? And just when it comes to just the NYMEX prices?
That is my understanding.
Okay, so then, I mean, I guess, well, what I'm wondering is, would staff consider having some sort of deadline for coming up with this bid adder figure that's aligns with the NYMEX prices, or is it just something that may still fluctuate and even occur after the commission reviews the record? Is that what staff is considering?
My anticipation was that, you know, that there would be a delayed exhibit that includes the NYMEX updates, and that these additional updates would be rolled into that as well.
All in there. Okay. So you wouldn't anticipate getting a phone call, you know, weeks later after the commission's decided the case that, hey, now we know what's going on. What do we do with the increase or the decrease? It would just be speculative to know what to say, what would happen in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, there's a cutoff date for new information.
Okay. All right. And okay, so yes, all right. So as far as I understand it, and do you understand with I believe it was witness Pennington's testimony that they agree that the updates to Columbia will the bid adder will be updated in this process in the future along with NYMEX prices. They're not still asserting that the older bid adder should remain in play in this case.
Excuse me?
So at some point there was a controversy as to which bid adder to include. There was an older version. Does that reflect your understanding?
Yes, there was some kind of bid adder included with the originally filed numbers.
Yeah, and then there was a bid adder that came through a conversation with Wisconsin Power and Light. And now there's an additional update that we're looking forward to getting. Hopefully at the date we look at NYMEX prices, we'll have that figure as well. And MGE is agreeing to use that new update number. Is that your understanding of what's in play at this point?
Yes. And again, these bid adders are affected by more than just coal availability. So this update for the update for coal conservation would be, the amount of coal that's expected, and that's what we're continuing to have a discussion for. But even if the level of coal was held constant, there would still be some adjustment to that bid adder based on the NYMEX update as well.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. So that's all I think was coming up with your testimony. Okay, great. So thanks very much. Sorry for dragging you through history and the future predictions here. Any other questions for witness Field?
Yes, Your Honor. I just wanted a couple of follow-ups from what you have just walked through. So, Mr. Field, do you expect that the bid adder will rise over what it is in the commission's field forecast that was in the audit?
The dollar value in the exhibit?
Yes.
Yes, I would anticipate that to rise.
Okay. And then with regard to coming up with the bid adder, is it fair to say that unlike natural gas futures that are, on the night, you can get from NYMEX, that it is more subjective or discretionary because so much information has to be considered?
The bid adder itself is, I'm not sure that discretionary is quite the right word. They are adjusted in such a way that when coal conservation is an issue, that the model burns a certain amount of coal. Where it would basically be seeking a bid adder that results in a coal burn that aligns with coal availability.
Okay, so the adder is intended to give you the results that are consistent with coal availability.
Yes, when the model results come out, the adder itself is not directly reviewed. It's the coal burn output that we review to make sure that coal burn is in line with expectations of coal availability.
Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right, any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, no, let us get away with all of that. Okay, great. So I think that's all we have. Thanks very much. You're excused.
Thank you.
All right. Finally, Your Honor, the commission would call Jennifer Malley to the stand.
All right. Here you are. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Please state your name for the record.
Jennifer Malley.
And what is your position at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin?
I'm a public utility auditor.
And how are you involved in this docket?
I prepared the staff revenue requirement.
And did you file or cause to be filed direct testimony and surrebuttal testimony in this docket?
Yes, I did.
And did you file or cause to be filed an exhibit marked Exhibit PSC Malley 1?
Yes, I did.
And are you aware of any further exhibits that will be sponsored, delayed exhibits that will be sponsored by commission staff in this proceeding?
Yes, there will be two that should be coming in. The first one is the data request exhibit that should be coming in within the next day or two. And the second one, if there are public comments that require that, if we have 5 or more public comments, there will be an exhibit for that.
And are the statements and representations in the testimony and exhibit that you have filed in this case thus far true and correct?
Yes.
Do you have any additions or modifications to your testimony or exhibit at this time?
No, I do not.
Your Honor, the witness is available for cross.
Is there any cross? No. Okay, so I still have a few questions for you, witness Malley. And I'm going to direct you to your surrebuttal page 3, the last question, the second to last question and answer. I can screen too. So I'm just curious, do you see that, are you familiar with those, that part of your testimony?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to ask you a couple questions, and let me just stick to the ones we had in the offered evidence list. So first of all, did MGE request to defer the effects of the Inflation Reduction Act with commission staff?
No, they did not.
Okay. And what effects of the, I'm going to call it the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, What effects of the IRA do you anticipate in 2023?
At this time, the impacts are unknown.
So my last question, do those effects meet with staff's accounting policy team statement of position 9401? So do they meet with those requirements?
The commission could find that it meets the deferral criteria for statement of position 94-01.
Okay, and in terms of their material impact, how would we know that's correct?
Because the impacts are unknown, my testimony identifies the commission may wish to consider requiring deferral treatment.
Okay, and so just so we're clear, are you limiting, is there any limitation to your proposal to the issues of the issues that are applicable to the reopener? Or is it any costs that the utility may incur as a result of the IRA?
At this time, again, the impacts are unknown, but for the reopener proceeding, the reopener does include changes to the federal tax code, which would encompass the Inflation Reduction Act.
Okay, so, and what about if the opposite's true, if there's impacts beyond the tax code, would that be, would staff believe that would be a topic available for the deferral?
That would be, I believe it's implicit that this would be subject to the reopener, just because that is what we will be, that is the docket that we're discussing. So I believe that it would be things that are for this docket only, this reopener only.
So limited to the reopener, but more maybe just federal tax changes or something else contained in the reopener.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and then in terms of the fuel costs, any impact on fuel costs, would that be included in this newly proposed deferral, or would that be maintained in the fuel cost process?
I am not sure of that.
Yeah, I just thought of that. So just something to raise, I guess, to think about. Okay, so all right, I guess we'll leave it at that. Let's see what happens. Any redirect or any other questions based on my questioning? No redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, well, that got far. Hopefully it helped. All right, so thanks very much. Thanks for enduring those questions, and we will, I think that's all the witnesses we have. So at this point, we'll just be expecting refilings, including our special refiling process for, was it Kruger 2? And any questions generally? We do have a post-hearing schedule already set, so look forward to getting briefs and other documents from you all. Okay, well, thanks very much then. We're excused. We're adjourned.